You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 Goth Talk podcast.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. As we enter a goth's favorite time of year and a Gothquisition-sanctioned month-long holiday, what an honor it is to be aware and entangled with the cacophony of orange, red, and yellow, the slowly decaying fauna and the cultural celebrations of death, the macabre, and the joy of creepy curiosities. Behind the capitalistic slop, we often find a communal engagement with decay and death, the dance macabre, the slow walk to the grave, and the ghost stories we tell to inject whimsy and absurdism into the visceral and unavoidable process of mortality. Before we get into today's episode, though, we have a word from our sponsor, Chris Cantor. You may remember Chris Cantor from our 2022 episode on Procession Magazine, which was really a big love letter to goth zines and the medium and the art of printed media. So I'm really excited to share Chris's announcement with you. Let's get into that right now.
Hello everyone, Chris Cantor here. Procession Magazine is back. We're a print magazine focused on goth, darkwave, industrial, and other cool spooky shit. And we're really excited to bring you issue 10, featuring interviews with absolute legends operating in our scene today. Check out exclusive interviews with Aesthetic Perfection, Red Lori, Yellow Lori, Occults, Frenchie and the Punk, Circuit Preacher, Cut Rate Box, Agency V, Brittany Bindrum, Noir, Electronic Saviors, DJ Vegan in Black, and author Nicholas Kaufman. A huge thank you to everyone who contributed to this special issue, and to everyone who has contributed to Procession Magazine in the past. Purchase your copy at processionmagazine.com today. And please look forward to more exciting things to come from Procession Magazine.
I'm a big fan of goth magazines, and I'm a big fan of Procession Magazine. So if you can take a minute, go check it out. Grab yourself a quite affordable copy of Procession, and I know you won't be disappointed. Well, we're here once again, engaging in a yearly tradition of inviting someone working in the death industry, as it's called, onto this podcast to discuss topics such as contemplating the end of life before we arrive there, how to move through grief, and even metaphysics and the afterlife. Our guest this episode is Alejandro Salinas of the Chicago-based goth band Grave Love. Ale is the president of the Chicago Death Doula Collective, a conscious dying coach, dream worker, clinical massage therapist, grief advocate, and has been facilitating death cafes since 2017. As always, I am your ghost host, Danny Ashes, and I'm here with my funeral friend, Trey. Ale, can we begin by asking you where your connection to goth culture began in life?
I had two older brothers and some cousins who showed me a lot of the more alternative stuff. Not exactly like goth right away, but
Right.
bands like Smashing Pumpkins and Nine Inch Nails,
Right.
Rob Zombie, System of a Down, all that like new metal stuff.
Yeah. We all were there.
Yep. And so, I just grew up, listening to heavier music for the longest time. My first show was like Slipknot. My brother was in a band. It was like more of like a rock band than like a goth band. And I remember hearing Rammstein's cover of Stripped, and later learning about Depeche Mode. And I remember when I first learned about Depeche Mode, I was like mad that no one had told me about Depeche Mode before then. Because all these other bands are covering Depeche Mode songs, and I was like, how come y'all never like explicitly told me about Depeche Mode? And then I heard about got into Bauhaus a little bit later, and just kind of consumed a lot more and more of the classical goth music. I will say, much to many people's chagrin, I was never quite into like The Cure. Admittedly, I'll put myself out there for that.
That's okay. I've admitted that as well.
I very much enjoy and admire The Cure, but they're not always something I'll put on for myself.
Yeah, they've definitely grown on me, but they've never been a favorite.
Yeah, and just like kind of growing up, and more so identifying with the like industrial rivet head goth types in school.
Yeah. We're talking about death. I'm going to try and like make all these little connections here.
There's a lot of
specific to goth, when you were sort of getting into and discovering the music and that sort of thing, was mortality or even the aesthetic of death something that sort of jumped out at you, or was that not a thought at the time?
I will say I grew up Catholic, which the Catholic to goth pipeline is very real.
Catholic to pagan pipeline as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean a lot of directions, really.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot in Catholicism that is kind of like inherently gothic.
Yeah.
Just like displaying their dead guy up there everywhere. And drinking blood in their rituals. And I got into vampires pretty young, I think in part because I was like, we're drinking blood here, like what? And reading like the young adult fiction vampire stories that really grew on me, and even just within my family, I grew up with an older brother who died before I was born. And so there was
Me
always,
too.
wow, yeah.
Yeah.
it's like growing up with like this ghost brother, and
Mhm.
my family never talked like a whole lot about it. A little bit, a little bit. If I asked about it, maybe, they would tell stories now and then. But mortality wasn't like a huge part of it. I think earlier on, I was more politicized and radicalized by the music I was listening to,
Mm,
especially System of a Down,
Mhm.
right. Yeah.
and learning about like the Holocaust in grade school at the same time. So I'm listening to this band talk about an even older genocide and
Mm,
learning about it in school. And I remember even showing my history teacher some System of a Down lyrics and being like, oh my God, they're talking about X, Y, and Z. And
yeah. Yeah.
and that, I guess, does speak to death in a very large scale. And that has had a huge impact. And I mean, there's a huge connection there for me between this aspect of death and being radicalized, because I think death is a very political thing as well.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
even, I mean, I understand Nine Inch Nails isn't like the most archetypally goth band, but between System of a
They're in the
Down, like
conversation. Yeah.
totally Rage
They're a
Against the
huge gateway
Machine,
band.
yeah, Nine Inch Nails, and the Year Zero album was huge. I loved that marketing campaign that they did for the Year Zero album, and even reflecting back on that album right now and where we're at and how crazy accurate the vision was for where we are now, which has been predictable if you just look at the patterns
If
of history.
Yeah.
And so all those things combined, I always had an eye on death and witnessing death in the news within my
Yeah.
family, and then using music as a means to just express emotions and feelings about those things, and appreciating artists that were exploring and talking about death in all kinds of ways definitely resonated.
Yeah. I realized I should probably clarify my Me Too. My older brother, he was a miscarriage, so probably a different situation. But I did grow up with sort of stories about my brother, very sort of like being a ghost brother, because I mean, my parents were very religious, and so they sort of saw him as kind of being around, being in heaven, still being part of the family. And so it was from a very young age, I kind of had to wrap my head around like, what is it? I'm not the oldest. Like so yeah, I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. Yeah, I think goth sort of, for me, opened the door to thinking about death and kind of normalized asking questions about the nature of being and the meaning of life, and sort of gave me a place to have those conversations, where I don't think I would have been presented with that otherwise. So for me, the two are very linked in a way. But so this is something I'm very interested in as well. You're the president of the Chicago Death Doula Collective. Can you share sort of what that is and what you all do?
We started the Death Doula Collective back in 2022 after there was a article written in the Chicago Reader that I was in, along with some of the other founding members. And one of the members, or now members, reached out and collected all these people and asked if we wanted to do a meetup. And we did. And we got together, and pretty immediately like the same day, we were like, what if we started a nonprofit?
Oh wow.
And with all these death workers. And at first I was like, I don't know how involved I can be. I definitely had a lot on my plate, a lot of overwhelm. And I wasn't the president at first, but now I have assumed the role. Um, and so what we do, it's mostly a group of death doulas. And for those who are maybe less aware of what a death doula is, they are people who work with end of life. In the same way, birth doulas help bring life in
Right.
to this earth, death doulas help on people's exit from earth. And that can look like a lot of different things. And a lot of death doulas have quite a range of talents, skills, and experiences that they offer to people towards the end of their life. And that can include just simply spending time with people at the end of life as a companion. I was involved originally as a massage therapist. I know people who are art therapists, music therapists, people who work more with like administrative planning, organizing a funeral, getting documents in order, creating legacy projects and things like that. So about a third of what we do is connect people to a death doula who are looking for one. And another third of what we do is have events like the death cafes, which I've been hosting for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had home funeral demonstrations and things like that, which
Interesting.
Yeah, the home funeral demonstration was a lot of fun. There's a lot of things that people don't know that they can do for their loved ones, creating new rituals that feel more authentic and wholesome and true to the person who had lived and the communities that they were in, and making something more meaningful and personal than the ordinary typical. I've been to plenty of Catholic funerals where it's just feels so scripted and kind of like this cookie cutter in a way that
Right.
can lose some of the depth and gravitas. Not to say that a funeral doesn't have its own gravitas, like by definition it's definitely, but I've heard so many people in the cafes and my own experience that there's just like a disconnect there.
Yeah, I completely agree, because a lot of the funerals I've been to have been very similar, and you sort of think like, I don't see this person's personality.
Right.
Where are they in this? It's sort of like, I've been to a lot of weddings that are very similar, and
Totally.
I think it does a little bit of a disservice.
Yeah. And yeah, so we do events like that. We've gone on tours to, museums, a death exhibit, or to go visit a cemetery or something like that. And the other part that we're starting to do, is help newer death doulas get situated or find their grounding, their footing within the field. And so we recently had our first mentorship program with one of our board members, and another board member is offering a 6-week series, because it's often difficult. First of all, the death doula profession is not licensed. There's no governing, organizing body. There's, there are certifications and programs and things, but unlike, something like massage, which I am a part of, you need to go get X amount of hours, you need to pass the board exam, etc. There's nothing
Right.
exactly like that. And also because of the nature of being a death doula, that it is often challenging to go just like shadow someone for experience
Right.
because it's already such an intimate, personal, sensitive, vulnerable setting. And so we get a lot of emails for people who want to either become death doulas or looking for a death doula. And so we've been working more on expanding those kind of offerings. And we don't have a full on training program or anything yet. That's something I would love to do in the future. And I feel like we're slowly kind of piecing and building out those parts.
Yeah. I think that education part is so important too, because I just the other day watched a podcast interview where they were talking about death, and the guest was asked like what they want done with their body after they die, and they gave that answer of sort of, whatever, I don't care, I'll be gone, whatever's easiest for everyone else. But there's a lot of work and unexpected stuff that goes into it if you're not prepared. And sometimes I just had a friend, someone in the Chicago scene died recently unexpectedly, and that kind of stuff happens. And if so I think that preparation part of it is important as kind of like a gift to the people around you, I guess.
Absolutely. It really is. I often say it's one of the greatest gifts, one of the last great gifts that we can give our loved ones. Because when we don't, there's often, aside from grief wrecks people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And grief itself also varies from person to person.
Yeah.
Some losses are much more devastating than others, depending on the setting, the circumstances, the relationship. But funerals in the funeral industry, there, like you said, there is so much, and it can be predatory as well, because people are in such a charged emotional state. We're not in a good space to be making decisions, financial decisions, spiritual choices, like all that stuff. There's so many factors to it that people who plan and take that off the table is such a huge relief for the family to have that set, and they can spend more time doing their own grief with each other without having to take care of all this business, which is, just such a nightmare and a headache. And I always joked, half jokingly, half like how I felt, that my dad died 5 years ago from COVID early on, which was its own thing unto itself, a whole set of different circumstances, and even the way like we could or could not, like it was very early on in May 2020 that before there was even a vaccine, before we knew so much about what was really happening, and that alone changed a lot about how we had the funeral. We had like social distancing and stuff, and they didn't want anyone to like touch his body in case he was still spreading COVID or something like that. And it was just a really interesting time, and I felt like he was kind of robbed of some of that. But even more than that,
that's hard.
Thank you. And even more than that, like after he died, because it was so sudden, and he was working towards getting like his will, and I don't think he had funeral plans yet, but in either case, nothing was settled enough for it to be really locked in, that it was really challenging to just keep making phone calls over and over, and just being like, hey, calling the banks or the lawyers or whatever kind of like the city, and like having to get death certificates and like show people death certificates everywhere, and just constantly being like, okay, so we need to, look at this account, and my dad has died, and all these administrative stuff
Yeah.
was super exhausting, and even planning the funeral um, is a lot. And now my mom, because of that, we are taking a much more proactive approach, and she was like, how is my son going to be all about this stuff, and I don't have stuff in order. So
Mm.
she's been getting like just stuff settled with like her will and what will be happening with like her estate and my siblings, and finding her a plot and just planning everything out so that it's there. And it really is one of the most helpful things, and I really encourage people to go do that. And one of the reasons why I like to do the death cafes versus working closer to end of life is because it can take families years to even get comfortable entertaining the idea of having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's odd because I'm in a situation right now where someone I know, their mom has cancer, and but she's in her late 80s as well. And when this whole process started, she was very unprepared and surprised. And it's just one of those situations where you would think that would be at the top of someone's mind. Like, how do I start preparing for this? Either the loss of someone, or for the person that's at the end of their life. But I do think it is an issue where people just don't want to think or talk about it. Certainly culture doesn't help in that sense. But I guess I've sort of been so involved in talking about death in general that it does surprise me a little bit. Which actually maybe brings up a different question. You've experienced a lot of death, and it seems to have soaked into your life kind of from every angle. Your band's name is Grave Love, which I know is a very goth name as well. But
Yeah.
you do, you incorporate like death into your therapy and dream work and that kind of thing. With all of the time you've spent thinking about mortality and this sort of process, what has death, I guess, taught you about yourself, or how has death kind of informed the way you live your life?
Really great question. And death is a mentor, a friend, a muse for me. And I think it is endlessly teaching me things about not just myself, but others and humanity. One being that everything changes and goes and ends eventually, sooner or later, including parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
We think about death and we immediately think about our physical bodies deceasing, right? There's like this physical, tangible death.
Right.
And then we also have the archetypal, metaphorical, endless deaths that we experience throughout our life. Sometimes, depending on how you're viewing it, on a daily basis or on a, seasonal basis. The seasons change, and it's an ending and a beginning. It is the equinox right now as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Summer ended. It's over.
Mm-hmm.
And we go into winter where even more things die, but it's
Mm-hmm.
cyclical. And these patterns, these wheels, right, that they keep going. And I've drawn a lot from Buddhism. You mentioned some of the dream work, and that is how I got into the death work. And a lot of Buddhism is so much about contemplating impermanence and mortality and being present with where we're at and making our time beneficial, not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of other people, I think is what gives people the meaning in life that makes the game worth the candle, if you will.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
That turn of phrase.
Yeah. That's a phrase I got from Alan Watts, who was also
Oh, okay. Yeah.
very influential philosopher in my life.
Yeah, especially with Eastern philosophy.
Totally. And even like there's other teachers. There's a teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, who died a couple years ago now. And he was a prolific teacher and has plenty of books and resources for people. And he has a really great video on YouTube on impermanence and death and what he calls interbeing. And basically concluding, using the example of a cloud, that we see a cloud in the sky and we have the language to identify it as a cloud. But if you look more closely at that cloud, it's made up of water, and that water was taken from somewhere else, and that water will go to something else and become something else. And so the idea, the concept of the cloud that we tend to hold on to is also changing. And that cloud rains and feeds the animals, it feeds the plants, the earth, the lakes, the fishes, all these things. And it transforms. And in that sense, everything is interconnected and being recycled, and that we're all made up, of stardust, that almost cliche at this point. But it's cliche for a reason, that there is such an endless way to view the idea of ourselves. And in relation to death, you're right. It's like if we identify ourselves as our name, or maybe the job that we have, the place that we live, we will experience a lot of death. But the more we practice integrating aspects of the external world within ourselves, that's to say, to think of like the trees as our external organs, as external lungs, as much as our internal lungs are part of ourselves, then the fear of death becomes diminished, because there's a different narrative that we carry that changes our perception of what death even means.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I completely agree, because I don't like thinking of, I try not to think of myself or the people around me as just sort of, I guess, entities unto themselves that are disconnected from everything else. It's that cloud example is great. We are all fluid, ever changing, and sort of reliant on each other and entwined with each other, I guess. And so, yeah, broadening that scope, sort of like the no self concept in Buddhism, I do think helps a lot. But that brings me, I guess, to the other side of that coin, which is because I also try to embrace some form of Buddhist principles, and largely relating to like being fluid instead of really rigid. But I struggle to accept change, and like you said, change is just a kind of death, and death is change. And I struggle to come to terms with the death of friends, or just leaving behind a part of my life or past relationships or that kind of thing, which I guess are a kind of grief. So I was curious if, with everything you've learned about grieving and all the tools you've curated for yourself, do you find yourself struggling with even occasionally some aspect of death or of dying?
Totally. I think the goal is not to completely be impervious to the emotional toll that death or grief has, so much as it is about taking those events and those feelings in and honoring them and allowing them their proper time and place, because not
Right.
allowing that grief, not allowing those emotions makes it more challenging. Like what we resist persists, they say. And same with the grief, that as devastated as one may be after a loss, when you resist your tears, you just create a backlog for yourself. And when you take the time to allow those tears to move and to flow and to wail, to rage, to scream, that you can only even do that for so long until that river runs dry, so to speak. And it is that exact process that is the healing, the honoring of of moving with it and saying, yeah, I feel like shit. I feel like shit,
Yeah.
and I'm devastated. I'm heartbroken, and I think that's the beautiful thing about music especially goth music, is that a lot of people resonate with people bringing their truth. That more or less is like, yeah, we feel like shit, and that's what is helping so many people move through it, and that human connection of like, damn, you're also going through shit. I'm going through shit. I'm not alone in this. And music has been huge for me in processing my grief and emotions. My first instrument was the piano, and just the amount of times that I have screamed until my fucking voice was, hoarse, and or shed tears playing songs that emotionally resonated with me. Or like even after David Bowie died, I sat down on my piano and played some Bowie and was just like, fuck, like, and cried, and using that tool to process these things. So the question, yeah, like, of course, I struggle in some ways, in some aspects, small or large, but it's not necessarily the goal to not be, but to move with it.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I think it's important to have, to some degree, built up a tool set or something in your mind that lets you persist through it rather than pretending it doesn't exist, letting it completely co-opt your life and take control, learning to process it in a way that lets you continue living, continue, existing in the world while still addressing it emotionally and mentally. But yeah, the main thing is you need to keep it from totally dominating and basically taking control of your ability to live.
And it can be really hard. And I also think that the cultures and conditions that we exist in under a sort of patriarchal white supremacist nation makes it extremely challenging for people to even have the time, space, capacity to even begin thinking about the grief, even if they wanted to. And I think that is also intentional in the system.
And I think even beyond those, I mean, those are massive stressors for a lot of people. But I think one of the fundamental things within at least our American culture that hinders our ability to confront death is this idea of the exceptional singular person, the
Exceptionalism,
yeah,
rugged individual.
It's American exceptionalism, the rugged individual that separates us from community. It separates us from the care of the people around us, both in receiving and in giving it to other people. Yeah. And that isolationism, I mean, it's fine when you're in a good place, but when, not if, but when you find yourself in a bad place, it just totally gets in your way of being able to process it, being able to find some solace. It just takes all that away.
It's one of the most beautiful things that I've experienced at the death cafes, and even one of the most helpful things after my dad dying, which was definitely, without a doubt, hands down, the greatest by far loss that I've experienced, is understanding and knowing, feeling the fact that grief is entirely a universal experience, and that since the dawn of things living, parents have died, relatives have died, and it's unifying to come together in a space like a death cafe where other people are there to talk about death specifically, often because they don't have the space to talk about it with friends or family, because they're afraid or uncomfortable or just don't know what to say or do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just don't even have a framework on death in a way that is useful to be with someone else who is grieving. And so to come in community reminds us that we're actually not alone in this, and it can be an isolating thing, but it is also one of the most universal things. And I think not talking about it hides that fact from us and keeps us in suffering, versus when we're open and vulnerable, that's connecting.
I saw that you received end of life training certification, and I wanted to ask you what that looks like, and what did it teach you about the process of dying?
Yeah, I got that certification when I started doing a little massage therapy at a hospice.
Yeah.
Which was quite a while ago now.
Okay.
And so I hate to say this, but like I not to say that I don't remember, but I've also learned so much since then that I don't know if I could pinpoint what came exactly from that training and what I have picked up along the way.
Right.
Because that was maybe like 7 or 8 years ago now. I mean, I've been hosting death cafes for about eight years or so now. And I did that end of life training a little bit before I started doing death cafes, if I remember correctly. And I did more recently take a training with, they're called the Conscious Dying Collective or Institute, Conscious Dying Institute, with some that program focused more on end of life planning.
Okay.
And creating like a roadmap for people and how they envision the last 6 or 3 months of their life. And that training influenced a lot of the questions in the Coffin cards, which is a set of questions that I put together in a coffin-shaped box to inspire conversation and personal introspection around death, dying, and grief.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I love that concept. I love the way they look as well. Really good design. Perfect like icebreaker sort of way to approach that, because I think I have a little bit of a skewed perspective just because of the kinds of people I hang out with. If I want to start talking about death randomly, it's going to be fine. But most people that are outside of that, I don't think have, as you were saying, have that opportunity. And so presenting it, not really gamifying it, but presenting it as in a like third party external sort of form is a great way to ease into that or to start the conversation, right? So I really do like that. I'm going to put a link to those in the show notes as well. I think people should definitely pick those up.
Yeah, thank you. The gamification thing is definitely something I actively worked against for this.
Yeah.
Because there are other cards, and I have nothing against the gamification of it, but I had various of these other cards that I was using, and they were never quite what I needed or was looking for specifically. And I think the other cards are really great introduction in a lot of ways for people who are maybe more resistant or hesitant, or to make it more just accessible. And not to say that the Coffin cards are inaccessible, but I wanted to have a level of sincerity and very grounded realism in it. And I think that's what separates the Coffin cards from the other kind of games. And some people call Coffin cards like a game, and I get it, and I'm not like offended by it. I think life in general is full of games we play, no matter what they look, even if they have life or death consequences, it's still a sort of a game. And yeah, I mean, it's been really beautiful to just see how people are using them and how helpful they've been for people to have conversation. I know people who will carry Coffin cards in their bags and their purses going to a dinner party with their friends or something, just to have those conversations.
I love that. So okay, let me ask, let's get into a little bit more of the, I guess, spiritual side of things. I was curious first about, I think, just about meditation. I try and meditate. I don't do a very good job at it, or I don't do it consistently, let's say that. But I think meditation can be extremely transformative, and I do notice when I'm consistent with it, I'm definitely more mentally flexible, and it's easier to orient myself towards being a better person. I've seen you do sort of guided meditations and that kind of thing. In relation to this subject, where does meditation fit into sort of coming to terms with mortality or death and dying?
One of the biggest aspects is that first of all, there are many different kinds of meditation. But I think something that most people will find as the base denominator is the breath. And our breath is one of our most constant companions. We take our first breath when we're born, and then we take our last breath when we die. And it only takes a single exhale without another inhale for life to end. And to be in a mental state where we increase the awareness of our breath brings us closer to that line between life and death. And what I mentioned earlier about these various amount of micro deaths that happen within our everyday lives, the breath being one of them. Every inhale can be a birth, and every exhale can be a death. When we have the intentions to view it that way in a meditation. And there's a lot of letting go in meditation, letting go of our expectations, letting go of the judgments that we have around whether if we're doing a good or a bad job. They're all aspects of the same thing that ultimately still prepare us for the big letting go at the very end. And, people often say to die before you die. And that can be achieved through a whole variety of means, including forms of meditation, where we, cut away some of the illusions that we have, or we cut away from some of the fears or anxieties that we have, so that we can be more present, more engaged, more mindful, more aware, more compassionate, more loving, etc. Yeah.
I think another thing that's really, I guess, psychologically powerful about breath when it comes to meditative practices and things like that is it's one of the very few autonomic systems that our body does just automatically without thinking about it, but we can leverage our thought and our will to control it, whereas most of the other body processes, it's a lot harder to see that direct effect of diving into your body and the awareness having a concrete effective change that you can see and measure. I think that is an interesting aspect of breath that makes it such a valuable tool for meditative practices.
Totally.
Yeah. I guess meditation for me is also just a lot of trying to rein in my ADHD and actually be present, especially now there's so many distractions. You never really have to think about anything. So being purposeful about I'm going to be here right now and sort of to train yourself to become aware of what's around you and what's inside you. And it sounds very simple, but at least for me, I think it's really can be a very profound experience. Something I don't have any experience with, I guess, part of the same thing that you have a lot of experience with is lucid dreaming and dream yoga. My only real familiarity with lucid dreaming is just sort of passively coming up in the context of the kind of I don't know, YouTube sensationalism kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly where that fits into dream yoga, but can you explain sort of what lucid dreaming is and how that fits into dream yoga and how that's, I guess, philosophically or spiritually significant in this context of being in touch with ourselves and the world around us, which is full of change and that sort of thing. That's a messy question, but I think you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's also a big question because it does cover quite a lot.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the dream work feels almost like a past life at this point for me.
Okay.
not to say I don't have a relationship to my dreams now, but I used to teach a yoga class called Dream Yoga. And I used to have a podcast I co-hosted called The Dream Freaks. People can check out. And that was co-hosted with two other friends of mine, both really powerful women in their practices, and one in particular who is a psychopomp tree car. Both worked a lot with, death and shadows and things. And I definitely learned a lot from them and was really blessed to learn from them. So lucid dreaming is basically the awareness that one is dreaming while they are dreaming.
Okay.
And that is, let's say, like an introductory level to dream work in some ways, and is like the elementary foundational level of dream yoga. And dream yoga is like the master's PhD program track, because it can, and there's levels, layers to dream yoga as a practice. And I am by no means a master of dream yoga. Mastery level dream yoga is the skills that allow Tibetan monks to reincarnate in the way that they do.
Okay.
Which requires quite a lot of practice.
Right. Yeah.
A literal lifetime of practice.
Right.
And dedication. But dream yoga is a Buddhist practice that is preparation for death and dying. And so the process of falling asleep is synonymous with the process of dying. And our dreams are synonymous with the state of mind and death. And so becoming aware of the dream is just like the first part of it. A lot of the sensational YouTube stuff about dream yoga gets into very kind of playful things,
Right.
You can have control of your dreams and do whatever you want, and go fly and sleep with whoever you want, and all this kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
That's fun. And I also don't really like to use the term of like controlling the dream, because I believe ultimately it is a collaborative effort between the dream and the dreamer. And that itself is a humbling idea.
Yeah.
And their levels of dream yoga include specific kind of tasks. There's a practice of multiplication in which you will try to take an object and create many objects, or to make objects larger or smaller. And they also get into forms of guru yoga, which, if we're blessed or practiced enough to even have a teacher, is in the dream state to receive teachings from this guru.
Oh, wow.
And so, for most people, practicing may not be in a lineage where they have a teacher, let alone a teacher who has also practiced dream yoga. And the other part, I think Western minds is there like, well, is it real or not, right? Are we just imagining, if we're dreaming, like, who's to say that's really
sure, yeah,
teacher, or even that's really a family member visiting you in death, from death in your dreams. And to that, I'm like, for me, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not even the right question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in the same way that we see a movie and that movie can have a profound impact on the way we view life, the way our bodies feel, the way we just approach and think about things changes and is valid. A dream is just as real and as valid, whether or not it's real or not. Of course, we know that the events of the Lord of the Rings did not happen. And yet it's a life-changing experience for so many people.
Yeah.
And it'd be silly to be like, well, that's not real, right? Like, yes, but that's not even the point.
Right.
And the question of what is real is a whole other philosophical aspect of dreaming and reality, and what we call reality, and the waking state versus our dreaming state, and the combination of these states of mind. So the dream work does a lot of things. In one way, it prepares us for that moment to be aware, right? To gain lucidity, and in the Buddhist tradition, that's to break from the wheel of samsara.
Okay.
Which is the endless cycle of life and death. And that's not necessarily a goal, because a lot of, let's use the term, monks, practitioners, in Buddhism, they call, there's a term for a bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva is someone who has had the choice to break from the wheel of samsara, which is to escape this endless cycle of life and death, to achieve a state of non-dual awareness, nirvana, samadhi, heaven, if we're using Abrahamic, language. I think there's definitely parallels there. So someone who has had the choice to break from the wheel of cycle, but decides to return and to stay in the cycle to continue to benefit others. And like we were saying earlier, this dream yoga is a process of reincarnation, and back to the image of the cloud, that our bodies are a lot like, you can imagine a cup, right? Our bodies are this vessel. And within that vessel is contained our consciousness, our spirit, and that is like the water in the cup. So when we die, the cup breaks. What happens to that water can vary. And this is when I say these practices take a lot of effort and mastery to achieve the reincarnation in the way that people think about reincarnation. Is that for most people, when that vessel breaks, that water will just spill on the floor. And that water, like the cloud, maybe a dog comes up and drinks up the water, or it, goes into the earth, into the soil, or it evaporates. All these things, right? It gets redistributed.
Yeah.
And the process of dream yoga and the process of becoming aware of this sort of dream self, the energetic body, is a lot like freezing the water, so that you can remove the vessel and keep the shape of the water intact long enough with the awareness to drop it into another vessel.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's my understanding, explanation of reincarnation. And that practice is part lucidity. In when we become aware of our dreams, we make more real the astral body, so to speak, and have a connection with that. And that gets into things like astral projection, which is adjacent to lucid dreaming, but not quite lucid dreaming. All kinds of really weird stuff out there.
I do find that concept more comforting than the Abrahamic, like Christian idea of an eternal consciousness and in heaven or whatever, wherever that would be. I find that idea of persisting as a conscious being for eternity to actually be quite terrifying. Just because it's so incomprehensible, the amount of time an eternity is. But this other sort of the circle of life and death and dropping in and out as a entirely different sort of experience, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think there's similarities, and even these ideas of heaven and hell, I find within, I mean, and obviously not explicitly, they're talking about heaven and hell, although they do talk about hell realms, the god realm, etc., the hungry ghost realm. There's a couple of these realms. But my understanding of like heaven and hell in a sort of integrative cross spiritual practice philosophy is that when we die, we have spent so much of our life projecting things in the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
And karma in the Buddhist tradition is not necessarily like a cosmic judicial system,
right?
So much as it is just cause and effect, which is maybe a nuanced differentiation. Maybe it's less of a nuance, but the actions that we take create habits, right? So,
right.
The basic word for karma is just action.
Okay.
And so what we practice, we get better at. And so in our life, if we practice being judgmental, if we practice being angry, we get road rage all the time, we cuss people out, curse people out, we get really good at that.
Yeah.
And so when we die, we fall back on our strongest habits.
Mm.
And because when we're dying, there's nothing external to project onto the world, those external experiences turn inward. And that process is what creates the experience of something heavenly or hellish.
Right.
Which is why when we practice loving kindness meditation, when we practice compassion, those habits that we build at our end create a much more heavenly experience.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I can definitely see how there can be an ease in dying if you have that, not muscle memory, but just inherently lean toward kindness and compassion, and that's the habits you've built. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Question back on the dreaming aspect of things. Just out of curiosity, Ale, with your interest in initially dream yoga, dream work, lucid dreaming, were you a natural dreamer through most of your life? Do you dream regularly, or was this something you went into because you were trying to access dreaming more readily, or how did you get into dreaming in the first place?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of trying to get more access and a little bit of just having a lot of dreams. Pretty young. I think like a lot of people who are into dreaming get started pretty young. And also got into dreaming because I was really into like angels growing up,
Okay.
being raised Catholic.
Yeah.
And also, I was an altar boy back in the day. It was like my first gig, I say. And I also read a lot of adventure fiction growing up. And between the collection of those, I tended to have very just interesting dreams. And sometimes of a spiritual nature, sometimes of like I remember the process of learning to fly, in a series of a couple of different dreams, pretty young. I don't know how young, like grade school, pretty early on, learning how to fly just by like running and jumping and kind of flopping back down, and eventually to a point where I could just like take off like Neo Superman style, and just be like pew, and then wanting to strengthen that, and a big change when I began to take it more seriously was when I did my yoga teacher training program. We had to give a workshop of our choice of a topic, and I chose dream yoga and kind of doubled down on these dream practices. And the workshop that I held was very well attended. And that's when I kind of thought that I could even do this kind of thing as like for a work, and host workshops and things like that. And then over the years, I went to a couple of dream retreats with various dream teachers, including one of the first books I ever read about lucid dreaming was by Stephen LaBerge, Exploring the World of Lucid Dreams. And he's one of the most prominent, popular researchers on lucid dreaming in the modern times. And lucid dreaming is a lot more of a Western approach. It'll be very clinical. They're like, here's these tools and research behind all this and getting lucid.
Yeah.
And I've also taken studied retreats with teachers who are more in the Buddhist tradition. And sometimes both. There was one in Arizona that I took with Stephen LaBerge and this other guy, Andrew Holacek, who is a Buddhist scholar. And so they co-hosted a retreat. There's another guy, Charlie Morley, who I take a retreat with, who's very much in the Buddhist Bon tradition. And he's a younger guy. He's a little older than I am. But again, very, very sincere and very comprehensive in his approach in ways that make the Buddhist teachings a little more accessible. Because they can be kind of heady, and they can be kind of, it's like it's a trip in a lot of ways to wrap your mind around at first, especially if you've grown up with very more concrete Western American values.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between the way we who grew up in the West from the Greco-Roman philosophical tradition conceive of reality and of the world and our place in it compared to much of the East. Now, that's not even a monolith in and of itself, and there's a lot of variety over there as well. But all of the variety over there is so completely alien in concept to what most of us grew up with as far as our conception of reality. And yeah, it's definitely, it was a huge source of fascination for me when I first started getting into it, and that's why I gravitated to it so much. But yeah, it's very difficult to get into, not because it's that complicated, it's just, it's so foreign, so different.
Well, you have to challenge your preconceptions of that sort of mechanistic methodological, naturalistic sort of way of viewing the world as somewhere getting down to ones and zeros, and being predictable in that way. It's not even a 180. It's just a different framework. And to the point about death and not thinking about death, and to the point about you mentioned like the Western audiences are like, well, what is real? You kind of have to get to the point of even recognizing that you view the world in a certain way as being a default, and that's not the only way to think about the nature of being or becoming and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. And, I think one of the biggest benefits of practicing dream work and dream yoga, in the same way that a physical asana yoga practice that we think of, like Ashtanga, Iyengar, Vinyasa yoga, etc., increases the flexibility of the body. Dream yoga increases the flexibility of our minds.
Right.
By changing what is possible, by even blurring the lines of what we view as real or not real or dreamlike, and understanding the illusory nature of reality.
Yeah.
And which is also, I think, something I really appreciate about the Buddhist approach is that so much of it has a very go see for yourself attitude towards it. It's not just take our word for it. They're like, you can also sit down and meditate and try these things out and see for yourself through the process. Yeah. It does have a very scientific ethos to their approach, which I value a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to say one way or the other, but I feel it's a little bit less prescriptive than a lot of the West, where there's a dictation of this is what you must believe, and it's sort of dictated to you until you just internalize it to whatever degree you can. Whereas from a lot of Eastern teachings, there's still a master-student relationship, just like there is when it's taught, but it's less about the master telling you, you must do it this way. They're guiding you to finding your own route. Mm-hmm. They're giving you tools and exercises, but not a prescription of how to do it. It's, hey, here's an exercise that other disciples has led other disciples to their realization. Let's try this. Is that working for you? Okay, that's it. Let's try this other thing. And it's a way to guide the individual seeker to finding their own pathway to that individual concept. And I find that to be a fascinating way of teaching. It's a collaborative way of letting the individual find their own route to that truth, however they want to perceive it.
Yeah, I think there's an element that is true there. And I also think that getting dogmatic can be found in almost anything.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
For sure. But it is a lot more open, and yeah, and especially the importance of that teacher-student relationship that is more direct, I think, than, and I can't speak entirely to like other Christian, I think a lot of people have spiritual relationships with, their pastor in a way that's similar to like teacher-student. And also, I think there's something in Catholicism, Christianity, that also separates the person from a more direct contact with the divine that is kind of regulated to the priest or pastor in some ways.
Definitely in Catholicism.
Definitely in Catholicism, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, I think I more or less agree with that. I think, yeah, my initial statement was maybe a little bit absolutist. But I'd say it's more talking about what I consider the defaults between the two traditions. The West seems to default more towards here's a pathway, let me lead you down it.
Mm-hmm.
And the East seems to lean more towards there is a path, here's what you can do to try to find it for yourself.
Totally. I think immediately of like bhakti yoga, which is a form of devotional practices, which can look like all kinds of things, whatever. And we see this, when you see the various kinds of ways people in India devote to different deities or specific practices, whatever that might look like, whether or not they're in relationship to a specific deity of sorts, and also the understanding that it's all kind of the same, whether you're sitting at an altar or playing an instrument and singing like kirtan, chanting the names of God, which I was drawn to particularly as a musician, to kind of even segue back into the grave love stuff. Even in my lyrics, I sing in Sanskrit and have these chants to Kali and to Ganesh, and in ways that are personal to me, and I don't hear that a lot in music sometimes. I know like the Beatles were doing their Hare Krishna stuff in their songs.
Yeah.
That was mostly just George, at least for the Hare Krishna part.
Yeah. And so it's been fun to kind of merge those things together. Because Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. And so to put that in a song for me, in our song yesterday that I wrote after a friend of mine died, the first like COVID era death that I experienced was a friend of mine who didn't die from COVID, but was still the first, death that I came to in that time of like, oh shit, like here we go. It's kind of starting and creeping in, and that song hit very differently. I wrote that song before my dad died, and I had gotten a reading from a friend who read some cards, astrology, etc., some intuitive stuff. And a lot of the stuff from that reading in particular shows up in the lyrics for yesterday, including Ganesh, which is a call for, like, again, the removal of obstacles, the things that are in our way, the walls that we've built up, to break those down, to let things flow, to continue on our path.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely also recommend people check out your Bandcamp, which I will have a link to. But that was one of the delights of having some friends on Facebook recommend we chat with you, is discovering your band. And I wish I had discovered it a little earlier, but
I mean, we're still pretty brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, I managed to listen to all of your music during the first like 15, 20 minutes of our show today.
Yeah.
Just right after Danny mentioned the name, I looked it up, went to the Bandcamp page, and just had it playing in the background while we discussed.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. I want to ask you a series of questions that are a little more straight to the point, short,
Sure.
that I thought would be a fun way to close out the show. So the first one is, how would you like to die?
Mindfully.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, would like to have the capacity and awareness to die consciously,
Mhm.
which is to say, effectively, not suddenly.
Which I think a lot of people have the opposite opinion.
Yeah. A lot of people
They
are
don't
just
want to
like,
know what's happening. They just
let
want
it
like,
be
oh, in my
over.
sleep or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like, I mean, in my sleep, if I was lucid, great.
Right.
But in my sleep, totally unaware, I feel like would be a lost opportunity. And so whatever it is, you know, and it really is a privilege to be able to die naturally or slowly. Some conditions more than others, you know. There are some very awful, painful ways to have end of life that can be drawn out through a lot of, you know, diseases that people get that make it challenging. And those who are blessed enough to not be in too much pain, to be dying of old age is
I think
not just for the person dying, but for the family members to have a little extra time with them and to have very conscious last moments, which any moment, you know, I think I would encourage all of us to approach as potential last moments, because they really are.
Yeah. And I think that's a good, like, I always like to make the argument for having some autonomy over death, over your own death, like getting to choose, you know, this is my death day, and whether that's a sort of doctor assisted kind of thing, which we don't really have in America. But that idea of, you know, all my friends and family are here, and or however you want to do it, like having some choice in the matter. I saw a clip of Caleb, who's a comedian on TikTok, talking about thinking about death in this way of sort of the experience of being young and being at like a family party and getting tired and going up to bed, getting in your bed, sort of leaving everyone else who's still in the party, but being able to sort of hear through the crack in your door all these people that you care about talking about you, having a good time, and just sort of knowing that that's going on and falling asleep and sort of thinking about it that way, which I thought was a really a lovely sentiment. But it's certainly a thing that I feel like we should have more laws that allow people to have some more autonomy over how they go.
Yeah, you know, something I think a lot about is the way that we allow pets to die with more preparation and planning than we do humans.
Yeah.
And we often keep people suffering unnecessarily because of the sheer denial of death and the hope that there's a remedy or a cure, and it's it can be a really tough pill for people to swallow, and it can make it harder for the person dying as well to let go in a more peaceful way. And I think it is really beautiful to allow. It's, you know, and there's a huge conversation about medically assisted dying and choosing to death and who qualifies and under what circumstances and situations that I think are all very, very valid. But I've heard incredible stories of people who are able to choose or to say, you know what, I'm going to have a big going away party. I want to have like a living memorial. And again, those are really helpful to get closure and find peace and solace in being more mindful, in being intentional with our choices, with our life, and creating rituals and ceremonies, not just for ourselves or the person dying, right? But the community. It's a communal
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just about the person dying. It's not just about who's left behind, but that relationship that exists between everyone involved.
What happens after we die?
I don't know. I love what Keanu Reeves said, where he says, "I know that the people who love us will miss us."
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, his I don't even remember the details either, but it was beautiful.
And I'm like, damn, Keanu, how do I top that? Um, which is, to be honest, like I don't know. No one really knows.
Yeah.
And there are people who have died momentarily. I've talked to people who've died, clinically and came back. But even then, and I think part of the importance is this mystery. I think it's
Yeah.
important that we don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to know. And I
Yeah.
also like to think the Buddhists know. But who's to say, I do know that it's weird, it's strange, and it's a mystery. And I know that you at the very least stop breathing, like clinically, scientifically, we can talk about what happens.
Yeah.
But what happens? Like it's the probably one of the most psychedelic trips anyone will ever take, no matter how many psychedelics you've taken beforehand.
Would you like to be a ghost?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you believe in ghosts?
I'm open to the possibility.
Hmm.
I think I love hearing people's ghost stories.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, I'm always so curious because so much of ghost stories can overlap with like experiences of sleep paralysis and kind of discerning between those. Or yeah, I mean, I personally haven't had like a ton of like very strong ghost experiences. I do love I used to love watching, like ghost adventures and things like that. But I don't know. I'd be curious. I think there's something to be said about the energetic imprints and memories that we leave behind that may influence the places, the environments that we've lived in. But I don't know.
What project or art are you partaking in that makes you feel alive?
That's a good one. What project or art makes me feel alive? I mean, everything makes me feel alive. Anything that makes me feel, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Whether it's grief or joy or rage or hope or despair, even,
Mm-hmm.
everything is life. And I can't help but not feel alive, uh, except when I'm, you know, zoning out, dissociating, maybe.
Yeah.
And there's this idea of being like living dead,
Mm.
which I think a lot of people struggle with, moving through life, um, feeling dead inside for
Yeah.
all kinds of reasons. And I think it's important to to find life and even to, I think that often happens when we try to escape our pain and when we lean into it, as painful as it is. And that's also a reason why I think people turn to pain in some ways, is to feel alive.
Yeah.
And I can, empathize and feel for that. And it's also important to not just live in the pain. We honor the pain, and I think there's a way of perpetuating our pain in a way, because it's maybe all that we know or are familiar with.
Yeah.
And it can be comforting to sit with the familiar, and it can be scary not only to move forward, which is this process of stepping into a mystery, taking a leap of faith, can be its own form of fear and uncomfortableness. But there's also the grief of letting go what has been grieving us. And even when we lose someone, there's not just the death of someone we love, but there's the death of the dreams, the hopes, the plans for the future that we may have had with this person. There's the death of the person we were while they were alive. And there's so many other forms of loss that aren't just the loss of someone's physical body, but, social, aspirational aspects of our life that we lose. And that can be just as hard.
And I think that's why it's important to recognize those things happening to you right now, right? Because then you eventually will be forced into that position, whether you want to or not. So noticing the smaller changes and deaths, getting a new job, losing a job, those are even still kind of big. I like to take a moment to thank my food, because that's a kind of death. That's a sort of transformation on its own. So even those little small things, moving from one moment to a different moment, I find that recognizing those instead of just moving through them in a sort of dissociative manner, which I do a lot, but sort of acknowledging and recognizing those creates a familiarity that makes moving through bigger changes easier.
Totally. And I think balancing that aspect of death and loss with the aspect of birth, rebirth.
Right.
And, that's the beautiful part of looking to nature and the seasons as a teacher, an infinite source of wisdom, that for as much as there is death in the winter and there's cold, and there's also so much life still in the process that happens in that darkness that inevitably turns to spring, that inevitably turns to summer.
What would you like your funeral to look like?
I saw a reel the other day. I don't know how serious I want to be about this. If I really want it for myself, but I was very amused that they took someone's corpse and kind of propped it up and just had like a big party.
Hell yeah.
So it's a Weekend at Bernie's style funeral.
yeah. And I was like, y'all, if there's not like a goth club afters in my stage fit with plenty of fog in my coffin at the corpse. I don't want it, but
Yeah, I love that.
I honestly, and I hope I come to some sort of idea before I do die, but I I feel like I'm still taking my time to imagine and dream up my own rituals, ceremonies, music for my own funeral, as a sort of gift to the people who will be there in attendance. And I don't quite know what that'll be. It'll definitely be a vibe. There will definitely be a lot of candles and incense.
Oh yes.
And probably some ambient Nine Inch Nails music and some original compositions. And I would like, some kind of ritual that I don't quite know yet. We'll see.
My sister-in-law had this idea of building a Muppet of herself and putting that in the coffin and not telling anyone.
Oh my God.
Which I thought was really funny.
That's amazing. I love that idea.
Yeah. Actually, I'm curious, Trey, what have you thought about your funeral? What you would like it to look like?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking about my burial, what I'd like that to look like, and we've discussed that. I mean, I guess to some degree, I always viewed funerals as for the living, so I felt it wasn't really that important for me to think about that. Though, if I had to choose, there are definitely plenty of funerals that I've been to that I thought were very moving. Jeanette's recently is one of them, actually. I thought was a very, very good funeral. And I would love it to be similar to that, a gathering of people who I touched through my life, who have stories to tell, stories to share, and just get together and see one another. I want it to be an event that brings people together to share with one another. Whether it's focused on me or not is immaterial. I view myself as a catalyst for community. So I'd like to see that community coming together and just communing with each other and having conversations and just having a good experience at a shared event like that. And I think that's the most powerful funerals I've ever been to have been ones like that, where it wasn't wholly focused on the deceased, but focused more on the community that the deceased was sort of the hub of.
Totally.
Yeah. I like the idea. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, just real quickly that, the funeral ceremonies are a sort of weaving together of a hole in a cloth that was left behind.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to say, Danny?
I like the idea of being cremated and then rolled into a bunch of different like patchouli incense sticks and then just used at Nocturna for in perpetuity. I like that.
Yo, that's great. I have never heard the ashes to incense.
It has to be. I thought of that all on my own. But like they put ashes in like records and diamonds and shit like that. I imagine there must be a way.
Exclusive Grave Love vinyl release.
Hell yeah. Oh,
there was one I heard about that was fairly amusing. I've been watching, or I get fed a lot of Lucy Darling sort of stand-up stuff.
Okay.
In my YouTube shorts, and she always has a thing where she asks people, what's your name? What do you do? And there was this one person who I didn't see. It was just this clip of it. They were talking about what they'd done with their father's ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was she made a bong out of them. And the reason she made a bong out of them is that her father was a big stoner, and she never got a chance to smoke with her father.
I saw this one.
That's sweet.
That was really beautiful.
Yeah, and I thought that was an amazing sentiment.
Yeah,
is
I love
now
that.
I can smoke with my father.
Yeah.
That's really special.
And then last question in this sort of series, is leaving a legacy important to you or not?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
Yes, I think part of my attraction to vampires is a sense that speaks to legacy. You know, there's the idea that we die twice.
Right.
The first of our physical bodies, and the second when no one longer remembers us.
Right.
And so I almost feel self-aggrandizing to say that I would like to leave a legacy that in some ways immortalizes me. I also understand that even that will go eventually. Nothing is really forever. Nothing is here to stay.
Yeah.
Nothing will ever truly be immortal. But I think I would like to have a lasting impact on the people around me. Not just the people around me, but the world. Not the world, maybe the world. I have big dreams and aspirations, and I don't need to be, the greatest or largest, most famous figure ever. But even, my dad has a statue in our hometown in Mexico. And that has been really inspiring to come from someone who did leave that kind of legacy behind.
Yeah, that is really amazing. Yeah.
And to take that and run with it, not that he's a worldwide name or anything, but that was, and not just like being remembered, but it's also the fact that by leaving behind a legacy, I hope a positive one, because there's also people have horrific legacies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think more than anything, I'd want to live a life that was worth remembering and honoring in some capacity.
Before we go, can you share your socials with us? Let people know where they can look you up and your projects and everything.
Of course. Well, they can find the band at Grave Love Band. It'll show up. Grave_love_band. And you can find the Chicago Death Doula Collective at chicago.death.doula.collective. There's the Coffin cards. And then there's my personal Instagram page, which is Ale Salinas, ALEJ_. And one of those will lead you to the rest if
right.
Go digging around. But that's where I am on social media. A little bit on TikTok, YouTube, etc. But it's all same. Bandcamp, same.
Yeah. Well, Ale, let me say, well, first of all, it was great to meet you. It's crazy. I was just thinking about this before. It's crazy that I don't think I even saw you at Nocturna, but it just speaks to how big the Chicago goth scene is, I guess, because I've never run into you before.
It's easy to miss people at Nocturna.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I count myself among the lucky now, because I think you're a wonderful person, and this was a wonderful conversation. So,
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you for spending the time to chat with us,
No,
and for all the
thank
work
you.
you're doing as well.
I appreciate it. It's an honor. It's a privilege to be asked to be recognized in these ways. And if you do see me at Nocturna, feel free to say hi. Or at any of the various shows around town.
Yeah.
And Grave Love has the show. I don't know when this will be out exactly, but we'll be playing a show October 12th at the Point in Wicker Park.
Oh. Okay.
Goths for Gaza benefit show. And you can definitely find me there.
There's a Goths for Gaza benefit show, and I didn't know about this.
October 12th. Yeah, we just announced it about last week.
Okay.
Which tells me that we need to promote a lot harder.
Well, yeah, I want to share this as well on my Facebook, but hell yeah, that's awesome. I would love to go to this.
Yeah, I'd say you should have Sarah promote it, but she doesn't really have an event to promote between now and then anymore. At least not a major one.
Yeah, I'm sure if I send it to Sarah,
she would definitely put it out there. Yeah.
Sarah's great. What a gem and icon in the community. I feel really blessed to be living in Chicago and to be in Sarah's good graces. She DJ'd our debut show, which was really awesome.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
And then William Faith, her husband, mixed our latest single, Mirada.
Okay.
I saw that. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And they're such great people. They're so nice. And and just pillars of the community.
Oh, yeah.
Just huge pillars of the community. One time I asked Sarah, like, how long she would want to DJ or she would retire. And she's like, as long as I possibly could. So I would love to keep seeing Sarah spin even as she gets older.
Yeah, we're lucky to have them. I was thinking about that with the with the incense thing, because I was like, I'm sure Sarah's going to outlive me.
Could outlive us all. She'll still be spinning for people's great grandparents, grandchildren.
Yeah.
It's really incredible the diverse age range that happens, at Nocturna. And
yeah,
I know someone who, they're like, oh my God, like I knew your parents like back in the day, and now they're here, and it's wild, the longevity. And she recently told me that Nocturna is like the second longest running goth night in the world.
Yeah.
And only by
pretty
like
crazy.
A few months.
Yeah.
Only by a few months to some other event in London.
Pretty crazy. Ale, thank you again for taking the time to chat with us and for sharing your wisdom. I think before we go, I want to once again talk about the Taoist story of the butterfly, because I think at this point I'm contractually obligated to bring this up every single time we talk about death on the podcast. I guess that just speaks to how profound and meaningful this story was to me in sort of the process of alleviating a lot of existential dread around death. Basically, the story goes that Cho dreams of being a butterfly, and the butterfly has no memory of Cho. Suddenly, Cho wakes up and eventually has no memory of the butterfly. So did Cho turn into a butterfly in a dream, or did a butterfly in a dream turn into a Cho? And this, again, illustrates the transformation of things. A butterfly has a very obvious physical transformation over its lifespan, and the story suggests humans too can experience transformations in dreams, like being able to shapeshift or to have superpowers. And part of the point is that this transition from waking to dreaming is comparable to the transition from life to death. Though one of those we are accustomed to and one we are not as familiar with. But both are ways of entering a different form of existence. So this adds an ease and a kind of joy to death. Death is an end to suffering. Death is a transformation. So just as I may turn into a butterfly tonight in my dreams, I might transform after death into a new existence that can be content in its own way. There's that atheist saying of, don't fear what comes after death because it's just like before you were born, right? It's nothing, but it's not a perceived nothing. It's a kind of non-existence, but not in a scary way because you're not perceiving the non-existence, right? At least in the consciousness that we have at the moment. So we aren't aware of the transformations that preceded our existence, and we won't be aware of the ones that will come after. And I like this example a lot because I think dreams as an example of existence being fluid, being constant change, being contingent and contextual, and being a series of temporary states does provide some comfort over the anxiety of death, because dreams are something we are familiar with to a much larger degree than we are death. So I hope that provides you some comfort as well as it has for me. And I guess that perception is also sort of couched in this other view of reality. I wish we had time to sort of get into discussing the nature of reality, or what reality is, the sort of ontological, metaphysical aspect of all of this, because I love talking and thinking about that kind of thing. As you know, I sort of take this actor network theory side of things, framework of the nature of being as co-created, as being brought forth through action and interaction with people and the environment and other organisms around us. And I feel like this is even more prescient at the moment because we sort of live in a world where we are bred into apathy, to sort of accept the way that things are, to feel hopeless, to feel like whatever we do won't really make a difference. We're disincentivized to take action, whether that's through government oppression or capitalist distraction or good old white supremacy. We are, or even just sort of nihilistic submission. You know, the world feels too big and our role too insignificant to make any real change. But we're talking about transformation here, right? And I think if we accept the premise that there is not preordained or a pre-given world, but instead live as if the world is brought forth, is created through our actions, our interactions, that to me feels empowering. That I have agency, and my agency matters, and the agency of others matters. And the more I push to normalize a specific way of being in the world, the more I push to amplify and make space for what I think is just and fair, that then takes up space in the world and maximizes those ways of being and minimizes other more harmful ways of being. And I think that gives me more incentive to take action, to build community. And I'm not talking about, like, the American exceptionalism, the rugged individualism. I think that's all bullshit. I'm talking about metaphysics. I'm talking about the nature or composition of society and culture and matter and the universe. But that's a discussion for a different time. I want to mention that the questions I brought up at the end of the episode, while fairly ubiquitous, I did to a large degree pull from a YouTube show called Grave Conversations with David Deshmalshin. I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, who may actually be a goth himself. I came across that a few months ago and quite enjoyed watching through his interviews with various celebrities laying in coffins talking about death, because I enjoy conversations about death and understanding the ways different people think about them. And, to Ale's point earlier, very early in the episode that we didn't really get to about Goth being political, of course, death, like everything else, is part of the fabric of this entangled web of interaction, which includes politics and culture and society. And there's no way of disentangling that. So, of course, those things affect the ways we view death. And there's a whole other podcast we could do there, but I will leave it at that. So as we move into October now and the celebrations ramp up and slowly fade away, and we sort of get into November and the Halloween hangover, and for some of us sort of starting to move into SADS territory and the death of things and the changing of things, and even perhaps existential dread brought on by contemplation of global warming as we experience different types of weather. I hope that these conversations provide some value, some reflective comfort, some companionship as we all sort of move our way through life together, not isolated, but in sort of communion with each other. And to that point, we will return in November with a new episode. But I would maybe, if I were to give you homework, I would say in this sort of reflection of the moving, the forward march of time and the fluidity of life, make a purposeful effort to go outside if you're able and sit and listen somewhere in nature if possible, but it could just be outside your front door. When you can, take a moment and just become aware of what is around you, and aware of what is around you and aware of what thoughts arise. I think that is a practice and a moment that all of us could use. And then maybe reach out to someone and share with them, a close friend, share with them what your experience was like, what thoughts you had, what things you noticed. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Of course, I would like to thank everyone who supports us over on Patreon. This show would not continue without you. If you would like to share your support, you can do that for $1 a month to get access to Discord over at patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions. Or you can tell a friend about the podcast. That also is a huge help in spreading the word. So thank you again for listening, and until next time, have a happy Halloween.
Halloween arrives with a haunting yellow moon.
Black silhouettes fly across the sky, astride their magic broom.
Hooting and screeching in an eerie, raspy pitch.
Yet comical in character, the greening, green-faced witch.
Potions from big black pots are slowly brewing. Thick, jolly bubbles are rising and spewing.
Skeletons are marching from the graveyard grounds. Loose-jointed bones are making click-clack sounds.
Ghosts are among us from their RIPs, wailing ghastly noises that chill and tease.
Vampires awaken from long slumbering sleep, swirling their caves in a tango leap. Teeth long and sharp, all ready to bite, they slither about in the dark of night.
Bats flap their wings and hang oddly upside down on limbs of gnarly trees. They make a spooky little clown.
The creepy werewolf howls.
Eyes glow from angry owls.
Sleek black cats prowl. Their green eyes scowl.
Creepy spiders pitter-pat, making kids' teeth. All things this night intend to fright.
Spine-chilling creatures invade this night of ghoulish masquerade.
Children love to
Trick or treat!
for candy or other goodies to eat. They love parties for hobnobbin, with other goblins for apple bobbin.
Facing fears and acting ghoulish may seem silly or just plain foolish.
But tonight we'll mock in childish delight all things that go bump in the night. And until this time again next year, ghosts
And goblins
will disappear.